talk DNA, because DNA is a very broad term.
Yes.
And what is the truth about DNA? What can we really truly get out of DNA in today's world? And how long has DNA been around? Has it been like 30 years, 40 years, 50 years?
Okay, so yeah, I love studying DNA. I mean, the first sort of inklings of genomes and all that were back in the 50s. But truthfully, the first case that used DNA legitimately in a court to solve a case was in England, and it was 1988. And so you did not see DNA really start to become widespread use in a courtroom until probably the mid to late 90s.
So that's kind of like exactly when OJ happened.
Yeah.
So it was in its infancy, basically. DNA was in its infancy.
Yeah. And at that time, too, it was difficult to test it because you needed larger quantities of it. There were limited testing.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's evolving so much. I just wrote 2 newsletter articles in my newsletter about DNA, and the last one's all about kind of the different things that are evolving in DNA right now. DNA research, like they're starting to do research and develop tests where you could actually get, it's not really DNA, it's considered more of like a chemical compound that can determine your if you're male or female. Because DNA doesn't determine that. It can't determine male or female. You can do Y-DNA tests, which determine male, but you have to know first that it was a male. So it's a little tricky. So it's constantly evolving. It's constantly getting better. But for instance, this is a fascinating statistic I learned recently, and sad actually. So there are over 400,000 rape kits sitting in labs all over the country.
Yeah, what's his name? Last week tonight, John Oliver did like
I love that.
25-minute just rant on rape kits. It's insane that's brutal.
Yeah. No, and he did one before that on death investigation, which was hilarious and also very true, by the way.
Yes.
Anyways, I think something like only 0.2% of those kits, let's just say right now, whatever's getting tested, only 0.2% of those cases of those kids are actually solved based on DNA.
Wow.
That's
and you would think that has the best option of actually using the DNA to solve a case.
This just illustrates the point that most times either DNA isn't available at the scene, or it's partial DNA. They can't get a full reading, or it's degraded. It's just not what we think it is based on television. It's good. It's wonderful. It's getting better, but also it's expensive. And so another thing people don't realize is that when an investigator investigates a scene, DNA is not necessarily the first thing that they go test. Like if they have certain things that they're testing, because it's expensive. So they'll try other tests first, a lot of times, test on, I don't know, fibers and shoe prints and things like that. They'll send those off to the lab first because they're cheaper, they're easier to get. And then the DNA tests, again, it takes 6 to 12 weeks to get those back. Sometimes it's backlogged. They're expensive. And you were talking about police budgets and investigative budgets across the country that are constantly being challenged, and there's not enough money to do things that really need to be done. And I mean, and there's not enough technicians to be tested. That's another big problem. There's not enough labs and not enough technicians trained to test all of this, on top of funding resources being a bit scarce too. So yeah, we need some reform in that area.
Just talking to you in this episode, I mean, there's being a storyteller and a writer myself, it just seems that there is endless amounts of just ripe story ideas in forensics, just to create I mean, literally just having conversations with you right now, I've had 5 or 6 different story ideas. Like just like, well, we could do this, and we could do this detective story here, and and that's basically what TV shows are. Like there's just this one every week. That's why you could do 3,000, 5,000 episodes of CSI in multiple states, in multiple different genres. There's just so much to be mined. So as a beginning writer, if any writers are out there who are beginning, this is possibly a really nice niche to walk into without question. And if you know your stuff and you can actually write really well in this niche, chances of you getting hired at a show or streaming service becomes a lot better. Would you agree?
I would agree. I would hope that would be true.
Well, in the magical world, of course. Yes.